Hello, my fine feathered friends. Welcome once again to the Launch Anxiety Podcast. I'm Roya, dedeaux. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and today I am working on a Halloween costume. I'm recording this at the end of September. My family really loves to do homemade Halloween costumes that are like on a theme, and so this year we're all going to be like bugs and insects. So I am crocheting bee wings right now, or at least I'm attempting to. This has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about in the podcast today. I just find that I enjoy working with my hands while I talk. And so if you are like me, I invite you to pull up a craft or a project, and we are going to talk today about what to do when your teenager doesn't really want to open up, doesn't really want to share with you. You are a loving, attached, attentive parent, and you want to know what's going on with your teen. And for one reason or another, your teenager is very reluctant to open up and share things with you. And I know it can be so frustrating because you can help them. If you knew what was going on, I bet you could help them. And they are hesitant to open up and share. And so we're going to talk today about what to do if that's the case, how to make it so that you do open up, communication between the two of you, how to keep your relationship front and center, and ultimately how not to do more damage and keep those communication lines, keep them open or make them more open than they are. And who knows, maybe by the end of this podcast, I'll have even a bee wing and I'll put photos of it in the show notes and you'll get to see that too. We'll see. So one of the first things that I want parents to remember when they are worried that their teen is not sharing more with them is that it probably has nothing to do with you. This is one of the hardest things I think about parenting, is that even when it feels directly directed at you, often it has nothing to do with you. And one of the biggest acts of parenting, I think, one of the exercises that we need to practice, one of the muscles we need to exercise, is to be able to depersonalize it, to take ourselves out of the equation, to remember that our teens' desire to communicate what or how much probably has a lot more to do with whatever is going on inside of them and has very little to do with us. And if we can approach it as something that's about them and not take it personally, it's much, much easier to get to have perspective, to not approach things supercharged, and to be available and open when your teen is ready to come and communicate with you. So first things first, just try very, very hard to remember that it's not about you. There could be quite a lot of reasons why they might not want to share or open up, and again, they might not want to share yet. Sometimes they are definitely wanting to share with you. You're close. They look forward to getting your feedback, but maybe it's not going to happen in that moment. And so I'm going to go through a few reasons why it might be about them, not about you, just to help you remember. And I bet you know this. And I bet if you took a breath and slowed down, you'd remember these things too. But sometimes it's just nice to have somebody else remind you what else might be happening inside your teenager's head and how it's not about you. So one of the first things to remember is that it might be them being worried of judgment, of your judgment, even if you try to be non-judgmental. Even if you try to be the most accepting of all human beings ever, your kids still worry about being judged. And we can forget as we get older how intense that fear of judgment is as a teen. But one of my moments that I flash back to, I was getting ready for one of my first concerts. And I remember spending like literal hours agonizing over what shoes to wear. And I believe I ended up choosing a very cute pair of black boots that I got at a thrift store in Santa Barbara. But that is not the point, because I spent hours trying to figure out what to wear. And I remember fixating on these shoes. And then I remember getting to the show and it's all dark and everybody was all crammed together and there wasn't even room to look at anybody's feet, much less have other people be judging what shoes I was wearing. That lesson landed so hard that day. I think about it all the time. It's so helpful for me now to have that concrete moment of like, oh yeah, nobody cares. Not now. Maybe in other situations. I'm not saying nobody never judges, But that was the wrong place to worry. And I absolutely love, every time I think about that, do you remember the movie Ever After, the Drew Barrymore Cinderella retelling? There's a line, nobody will be looking at your feet or at your shoes. I think about that all the time because that line perfectly fits. And so that's my little mantra for myself. If I find myself getting fixated on being so self-conscious and worried about other people's judgment, nobody will be looking at my feet. Now, I've got perspective on that and I can remember that. But when you are a teenager, please remember, or when you have teenagers, please remember that that perspective doesn't necessarily exist yet. Like, there is still a very real and present fear that people will be judging, and they are trying to protect themselves from criticism. And that is a valid thing to do. Nobody wants to be made to feel badly about themselves. It is totally normal and natural to keep things close to the chest in order to avoid someone else's criticism. If you have reason to believe that this is the case for your teen, that they are often holding back because they're worried about your criticism or judgment, I think that's worth examining. I think that's worth taking a minute and thinking, okay, so why does my kid worry about my criticism? Have I been communicating in a critical way? Have I been trying to get them to change how they are? Am I overtly or covertly giving off the impression that I think they should be or do something differently? It's good information for you to have, and take a minute and assess how you've been approaching them. Another reason that they might not open up and share with you is just a straight up desire for independence. And I do think you need to cut your teen a little bit of slack with this one. This is their developmental job right now. They're supposed to, at some point, be able to figure things out on their own. And I think as humans, we can get this one a little sideways sometimes. Sometimes we try to figure something out on our own in a situation where it really would be helpful or beneficial to get some help, especially some adult help. But we don't always know that until after we've experienced the thing. Sometimes it's only in hindsight that we recognize that, like, oh yeah, maybe I could have used some extra assistance on this one. So a lot of times the teens I work with, they'll open up to me because I'm their therapist, and I'll ask if they've reached out to their parent yet about that. And they say, no, I think I'm supposed to figure this one out. Because they know that you want them to be successful. They know that you're looking to them to grow up. And they get this sometimes erroneous idea that they're supposed to figure it out on their own. And that's what it means to be a successful adult or become an adult. And that's true. Sometimes, right? Sometimes we do want our teens to be able to figure something out for themselves. And other times we know that really, like, no, this is one of the ones to call in the cavalry. Like, it's okay. You can come ask your mom or dad for help on this one. But we have to cut them some slack because they won't always know the difference between those two experiences until after they've had that experience. I do think that's part of the process of growing up, is knowing when to force something through, be independent, keep it to yourself, versus when to ask for help, open up, share. That process in and of itself is part of growing up. So cut them a little bit of slack where that's concerned. Another reason they might not want to share is just good old-fashioned embarrassment. Sometimes we have shame. That's okay. Sometimes we're embarrassed about the thoughts that go through our heads, about how we handled something, about getting ourselves into a situation to begin with. Like, they might not want to share just because it's embarrassing. And you know what? This is a really good opportunity to remember that as your teens grow up, they get not only autonomy over their own bodies, their choices, decisions about their time and stuff, but also they get to have autonomy over what part of their innermost thoughts and feelings to share with you as well. And so if something is embarrassing and they don't want to open up and admit that, okay, let them keep that one. A slightly more sombering reason why they might keep stuff to themselves and not share with you is also a lack of trust. You might have broken their trust in the past. Maybe they shared something with you that felt open and vulnerable, and you didn't treat it with the respect that they were looking for. Maybe you straight up broke their trust and you shared something you ought not have. Maybe, you've had a lot of conflict lately, and so they don't feel like you are the warm, nurturing, safe space to go to with feelings. That's going to take some repair on your part. And again, this is, it's sad and it's awful, but it's good information to have if that's the case, because here you are looking to repair it. So what can you do? Maybe not for this one. This particular moment might, be too late for this one. But what can you do so the next time there's something big, they'll open up and share with you? What kind of repairs can you make? And then while we're on the subject of trust, this happens so often with the teens I work with that it's not that they don't want to share with you. Sometimes they're dying to share with their parent, but the information that they have involves somebody else. And so they have either been instructed by a friend not to open up and share with anybody, or they feel like because it involves somebody else, it's that other person's information and they're not supposed to share it. And I can respect that, but I do think that we as parents need to have a lot of conversations with our teens, like before anything ever happens, about when we should share and when we shouldn't, and about the red flags of if you've got a friend who's telling you that you cannot turn to your resources, if you cannot turn to the people that you trust, if you can't ask for help with something, that's a red flag. And then you need to also talk to your teens about like ways to share without sharing. So, and genuinely help them with this part. Like, you can tell me what's going on and I will not get upset with you if you do not, for example, identify the person that this story is about. Or I will be absolutely silent for 10 minutes while you tell me, just get everything off your chest. And I will be absolutely quiet and not pass any kind of judgment on your friend. Or tell them, like, so as a therapist, we have limits of confidentiality. Most of the time, what we talk about in therapy is totally private, totally confidential. But there are some exceptions. And those exceptions generally have to do with, like, child abuse or somebody hurting themselves or somebody else. And so often people have questions about, if I tell you this, does that mean you have to report it? And so one of the things we do is we tell people ahead of time. We say, look, here are the limits of confidentiality. Anything you tell me about this, and this is something that I legally have to report. Anything you tell me about this, and this is something that I might report. And here's how I would go about doing that. And so giving people the informed ability to make a choice is really important. And so for your teens, you might front load some stuff, right? You might say, hey, look, if your story has anything to do with blah, blah, and blah, I would feel the need to reach out to your friend's parents. But I would only feel the need to reach out if such and such was about to happen. Or, here's another situation, and what I would most likely do in that case would be to work with you on how you could talk to somebody. I wouldn't just go speak to anybody without telling you first. Or, just front load, have some hypotheticals so that they can make a more informed decision about what you would share and when. Sometimes our teens don't share with us because it's just exhausting. It's just hard. You've had that, right? Where you just have like something that happened, or you've got a feeling and you don't know how to talk about it. And the thought of trying to translate that feeling or that situation into words that somebody else would understand is exhausting. Or you just don't want to relive it. You just want to put it away and ignore it or be distracted from it right then. Sometimes articulation is exertion, and that exertion just feels like too much. And in that case, I would say, I did another podcast about this, about helping your teen have a lot of different outlets. I want you to remind your teen that they don't have to talk to you about anything, but that they've got art supplies, there's friends, you're around if they change their mind, if they want to write something to you or text it to you, if they want to put on music and blast it really loud, like help them get set up for that kind of emotional catharsis. But sometimes talking about it is exhausting. And this is why we have things like art and music, and specifically why we have things like art therapy. It's because sometimes talking about it is difficult. And I want you to remember that about your teen. Sometimes it's not about, they don't want to share. It's just they're tired and it's tiring. And again, that has nothing to do with you. So part one of dealing with your teen's reluctance to talk to you is recognizing that it might have nothing to do with you at all. All right. Part two is creating a space, an environment where they feel more compelled and more comfortable speaking to you about big, tough things. This is one of those areas where I hate the phrase safe space. I think its original intent was good, and I think too many of us have co-opted it into meaning comfortable space and not actual safety. So I can't quite take myself seriously when I use the phrase safe space. So forgive me here as I overly explain a couple things. But what I mean by safe space here is that your teen very often feels criticism acutely. They might be reading a lot into your silences, into your sighs, into what you do say or even what you don't say. And so I think it can be really easy to create a space that does not feel comfortable for your teenager to open and share. And so again, this isn't like a personal attack. It does have to do with you, but it's not necessarily even anything that you did wrong. I just want you to be aware of the fact that it takes a lot of work to create an environment where your teen feels comfortable sharing big, emotional, heavy stuff with you. It's very often like your questions can come off as extreme criticism. Even if you're asking for clarification. So one of the steps to avoid this and to help create an environment where your teen feels a lot more comfortable is really, really, really the first time they come to you with something, just listen. That's it. Just listen. Please, just listen. If they are opening up to you, if they are sharing something with you, do not take that as an opportunity to impart a lesson unto them. Even if it's the best lesson that has ever listened, even if you have the single key to existence, that is not the time to give it to them. Let them, in a space that is free of judgment or questions or any kind of extra influence from you, just let them share. Communicate with them through your verbals and nonverbals that they did the right thing by coming to you and sharing their feelings. Total and complete acceptance at this point of the conversation is what I am saying. All right. Just let them come to you and don't try to teach them anything. Even if you would have done something differently, even if you see mistakes, you see flaws, you see ways they could have changed, I do not care. At that moment, you are to find phrases like, I completely understand, or it's absolutely okay to feel how you're feeling. I get it. That's it. Limit yourself in this moment only to phrases that show complete and total understanding. If they feel comfortable with you and you build on that kind of a bridge, there will be times later where you can say, hey, I was thinking about that thing that you told me and I had an idea. Do you want to hear it? And then if they do, cool. And if they don't, also cool. But don't do it in that very first moment. Give them some time to just have their feeling, and you show them that the feeling and the sharing the feeling with you is good and accepted and okay. A lot of times, the time your teenager decides they are ready to open up and talk and share is after midnight. It's bedtime. It's when you're exhausted. It's late, and you have to get up early, and all of a sudden they're willing and ready to open and share. And yes, this is a universal teenage truth that they are so much more likely to open up and share late into the night. I don't know what it is. I have some theories, but it cracks me up because I don't even know how many thousands of parents I've worked with who are like, how come my teen only wants to talk to me when it's 2:00 in the morning and I have to go to sleep? It happens to everybody. So to that, I say, do your best. If your teen is ready to talk. Try. Really do try. I understand that there's limitations and you have to get up and go to work and things like that. But if you at all can be present when your teen is ready to be present and open, please encourage that. And you can be creative. Like sometimes, you might not be able to stay up and have a 3 hour long heart to heart that starts at 1 a.m. But maybe you could start some sort of like joint journal so that you pass it back and forth, and so they can write or draw in it at 2 o'clock in the morning, even if you're asleep, and then you can get it and look at it the next day, and you can go back and forth like that. Or they can leave you notes or text you, and you set your phone to silent so that those texts don't wake you up. Or you can come up with some creative ways to communicate if you can't stay awake. But if you can, please try. It really is a universal experience for teens. It cracks me up, but it happens. So if you can, please do. And speaking of lots of creative ways to connect and communicate with your teen, they don't always like opening up and sharing doesn't always have to be a big, heavy thing. And one of the things that you can do is to encourage them to share lots of times. But that's not going to look like, sit down, child, and have a serious conversation with me. What it really is going to look like is, hey, do you want to come do some errands with me? Hey, I was going to go get some coffee. Do you want to come? It's going to look like, hey, come drive in the car with me. And it's also going to look a lot like you joining them doing what they want to do. So if they are watching YouTube, you snuggle up next to them and watch some YouTube with them. If they're playing a video game, you say, hey, what are you playing? Let me see. You spend time doing the things that they're interested in, because that's going to be the vehicle where those conversations happen. That's going to be the space where they open up and share some frustration about that level that they can't quite beat. And then that leads to the conversation about something else that's frustrating them in some other place. That's going to be where you get insight about where their brains are, about how they're thinking and feeling. It's going to be those moments where it doesn't even have to be full conversations. Often it's just going to be like a little quick sentence here or there that carry a lot of weight. And that shows them also that even if they're not talking and they're not sharing all the deep everything, even if articulating is really hard, even if they're afraid of judgment, all those things we already talked about, that you are there and that you are present. And sometimes that's half of it, is just your presence is enough for them to feel connected to you and feel more able to open up and share at another time. So please play the video games with them, watch TV with them, watch YouTube with them. And when they're not around and you're watching something and it reminds you of them, share it with them. There are a lot of different ways to keep communication open with your teen, and it's not all on your teen to open up and share with you. That brings me to another thing, which is to model communication. Model the kind of communication you want your teen to experience with you. And it doesn't have to be personal exactly. Like you don't need to share stuff about, like, I don't know, your relationship with their dad, for example. Like it doesn't have to be information that maybe they ought not have or that puts them in an awkward spot. But you can still talk about frustrations and how you moved through them. You can talk about how you handled feelings in difficult times. But one other like big giant key place to do this is talking about feelings related to fictional stuff. When I was younger, my mom used to drive me around and we'd listen to like talk show radio, and people would call in and talk about all their messy social lives. And we had so many great conversations about these strangers. And some of that directly translated into conversations about friends and stuff, but a lot of it stayed very hypothetical. But she imparted vast amounts of wisdom in very sneaky ways I didn't even realize that I was getting. And that particular radio show might be obsolete now, but like there's definitely drama happening amongst your teen's favorite YouTubers, or social media influencers or whatever. So if you have if you are watching those videos with them, that's a great place to kind of model the type of conversation, talk about the things without talking about the things, So definitely a plug for using, and I say fictional, I know those people are real, but hypothetical, theoretical situations. Sometimes the teens I work with want to share with their parents, but they love their parents and know that if they opened up about how hurt they were or how they were struggling, their parents would maybe not take it personally, but they understand that the parents would hurt for them. And these teens don't want to make their parents hurt because they love you. And so, to help combat this piece, I want to remind you that it's okay if your teens open up to somebody who isn't you. This is where a therapist comes in. This is where trusted friends come in. This is where, like, I have a goal that my kids each have, 5 to 10 adults that I trust, that they would go to with big, important things. And then I can trust those adults to give good guidance and help my kids, because they won't always want to come to me. Your teens don't always want to go to you, but they still might need to go to somebody. So help them use those other adults, those other relationships as well. Those are important. And along those lines, you have to respect the privacy of those relationships. If they're talking to somebody else, there's a reason, and you need to trust them and respect that privacy and respect it in other ways too, and not go prying through things. You can't demand somebody be open with you. If they share important stuff with you, don't go posting it all over. And you have to respect the information that they have given you as well. I want you to think as communication with your teen as a gift. Don't squander it. Don't take it for granted. And you kind of have to play the long game. You might not get a single piece of information, especially if it's something that you'll only get if you demand it or force it from them. So instead of thinking about, I need to know that particular thing, think big picture about, how do I foster more trust and open communication with my teenager, and play the long game. Get your teen a therapist before there's a crisis, because very often it's really hard to open up and talk when something bad has happened. It's a lot easier to share with somebody you already trust and already have a relationship with. Work now, before there's been any huge anything. Work on spending that quality time playing video games together, watching YouTube together, having those conversations. There's a lot of pre-work that happens with the assumption that there will be times where your teen really, really needs to communicate something and it will be difficult. So set the groundwork so that you've got that kind of communication with them up front. And it's hard, and they won't want to all the time, and you're going to have to walk that tightrope of encouraging and being open and willing and welcome without being forceful and coercive. And it's a dance and every other kind of metaphor I can think of, but it's worth it. It's worth it. All the teens I work with, they want to have a relationship like that with their parents. They really do. So remember that they want it too. Okay? You just set the stage, create the environment, and when in doubt, you can ask them. Be accepting, model it, trust them, and help them trust themselves. All right, so that's all for today. This was a little bit of a longer one, but I had a lot to say about communicating with your teen. I have gotten, I don't know if I'm going to end up using it or not, but look, it's going to be the wing of a bee one day. It's growing. Those of you who are watching this, those of you listening, I'll post pictures, and don't forget, you can always follow me on Instagram. I am Launch Anxiety there. I'm on TikTok as well. Stay tuned for the next podcast. Take care, everybody. P.S. I have a little bonus thing I forgot almost to mention. You all know, I hope at this point, that I have a free parents guide that you can download at launchanxiety.com. But one of the other things that I wanted to mention is that I have an online art group for teens as well. And it's not exactly therapy, but it isn't. No, that's not a sentence. It isn't not. It's led by a therapist. It's led by me. And we talk about a lot of really important, wonderful things. And we use art and writing as an outlet for these big feelings. And one of the pieces of feedback that I get from parents all the time is how much they love my art group, because their teens use the art that they created in the art group as a vehicle for talking about important things with their parents. So I get messages weekly from parents who say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for the prompt that you gave them week, my teenager came and showed me the art that they made, and it led to an incredible conversation. So that is just one resource I want to give you that might also help your reluctant teen open up and share more. So you can find all of that at launchanxiety.com.